every February the 2nd, what do we celebrate as a church? In Spanish we call it Dia de la Candelaria. What do we call it in English? In English, February the 2nd is the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord. So what is the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord all about? In the Gospel of Luke, Luke tells us that Mary and Joseph were good Jews, and on the 8th day after Jesus' birth, what did they do? They took him to the temple to be presented in the temple and to be circumcised. That story is found in the Gospel of Luke, and that's the story on which this Feast of the Presentation of the Lord is based. It's Jesus being presented in the temple. In Spanish we call it Dia de la Candelaria. A Candelaria is like a candelabra. We know that with Christ's coming to the world, Christ is the light of the world. What do candelabras contain? They contain candles which light up any dark space. So how it is that Christ is the light of the world. Because it's Dia de la Candelaria, many times we bless candles on the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord. But also in the Hispanic culture, we know that it's the end of the Christmas season. Did you know that? In the Hispanic Latino culture, we celebrate Christmas not for a single day, not for a week as we do for a church, not for 12 days, the 12 days of Christmas, which go from Christmas to Epiphany, but actually in many Latino homes, they leave the nativity set up from Christmas Eve until February the 2nd. Why February the 2nd? Where did that come from? Did I just make that up? February the 2nd. If you start counting at Christmas, December the 25th, then that's going to be 40 days after Christmas. In the Bible, there are many instances where it talks about 40 days. For instance, when the flood came, how long was Noah in the boat? How long did the rains come down for? 40 days. When Moses went up the mountain, how many days was he on the mountain before he received the 10 Commandments? What are you going to guess? 40 days. When the Israelites arrived at the Promised Land, they went in and investigated the land for how many days? 40 days. It's a significant number, a number of completeness. So that, for instance, when Jesus fasted and prayed in the desert, what are we guessing? How many days did Jesus spend there? 40 days. After he was risen from the dead, how long did he spend on this earth before ascending into heaven? What are we guessing? 40 days. Are we understanding the symbolism of 40 days? 40 days is in the Bible quite a bit. So what's the 40th day after Christmas? February the 2nd, Dia de la Candelaria. So every year when we celebrate Groundhog Day here in the United States, February 2nd, and I hear there are going to be 6 more weeks of winter, says Puxatawny Phil. Every year when we celebrate Groundhog Day, for the church we celebrate Dia de la Candelaria, or in English, the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord. So we talked about how it is that in Latino families then, how it is that it's the end of the Christmas season. So what does that mean in Latino households? We know that many households have an image of the Christ child. So typically what happens is on Christmas Eve then, the family will get together and have what they call the arrullo, where they rock to sleep the baby Jesus. They sing a song, a lullaby, and they rock to sleep the Christ child and then lay him in the manger. So they do that on Christmas Eve. And then the Christ child lies in the manger until February the 2nd, when they take the image of the Christ child to church, which is why last weekend and this weekend we see a lot of images of the Christ child coming to church, to be blessed. And then what do? Do we pack him away in a box for the rest of the year? No, not in our culture, not in the culture of our ancestors. Instead, what happens is we see that this Christ child is in a chair. We set the child up for the rest of the year on our home altar or in whatever suitable space in the house. So in the Latino culture, we never pack away Jesus. What do we do then? We lay him down in the Christmas creche in the manger scene on December the 24th. 40 days later, we pick him up and we take him to church for a blessing, and then we sit him up for the rest of the year. And that's what we celebrate in Dia de la Candelaria every February the 2nd. We also know that February the 2nd is the traditional day on which we have tamales and atole. So on January the 6th, we have the rosca de reyes, the king cake, and whoever finds the images of the baby Jesus brings the tamales to be shared on February the 2nd. There you go. So Shirley remembers Candlemas Day. Interesting. That's the same celebration. So Christmas, think about it for a moment, it ends with M-A-S, which is the Mass in which we celebrate Christ. What's the Mass in which we celebrate candles? Candlemas, or February the 2nd, the day of the presentation of the Lord, we also knew or know as Candlemas. It's also important in the Hispanic culture and Latino culture because out of that tradition of presenting Jesus at the temple, we created another tradition which we call the presentación de 3 años, presenting children at 3 years old to the church. What's the scriptural foundation for the presentación de 3 años, the presentation at 3 years old? It's that story of Jesus being presented in the temple. In the same way that Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the temple and presented him to the Lord, parents in the Latino culture take their children to the church at age 3 to be presented to the Lord. Why age 3? The history of that is a little less clear, but it's probably likely due to the fact of child mortality in various countries, right? Rather than taking the child to the church at 8 days or at 40 days, let's make sure that the child lives through the first years of its life, and then take it to church at age 3. So those are the traditions that have surrounded the presentation of the Lord in cultures of the southern United States and going down into Mexico, Central and South America. So Dulce is saying there's also a tradition in Mexico where if you are a godparent, a godfather, a godmother, then you take your godchildren to church on Candlemas on February the 2nd as well, and you celebrate Mass with your godchildren on February the 2nd. Isn't that a lovely tradition? Being a role model of faith for our kids and taking them to church.